We've all come to think of compromise as some sort of a virtue. We like to think these days that there are always two equally valid sides in any conflict of principle, and that balance is something that should be sought somewhere in the middle. In many cases, I agree this is true. But what if I want to drink Kool-Aid and you want me to drink poison? Should I compromise and drink some Kool-Aid mixed with a little poison? That would seem to be the moderate and balanced solution. And I wouldn't want to be viewed as being uncompromising and too much on one extreme, would I? Hegel's dialectic is a useful concept. It's an interesting philosophical tool. But some people, I think, take it too literally and believe that every thesis has to be merged with its antithesis in order to produce some sort of synthesis that blends the two. Well, if we take truth for our thesis and untruth as our antithesis, should we all go around telling half-truths as a synthesis? Should we find a perfect synthesis between justice and injustice, between liberty and tyranny? In some matters, what we need, I think, isn't fusion, but fission. We don't need to combine the gold with the dross, but separate the gold from the dross. So sometimes it's desirable for two to become one. Other times it's desirable to extricate one from the unholy union. Sometimes it's desirable to choose one and abolish the other. Other times it's desirable to abolish both. If King Kong and Godzilla are warring with each other and destroying Tokyo City, no one wants a synthesis of the two joining together in a concerted rampage of rampant destruction and mutual annihilation. They would prefer to banish both monsters from their city, never to return. This is how it is with our political and spiritual situation in the West. Do we want a donkey or an elephant to run through our houses, smashing everything? Or we can alternate between them every few years so that they both have an opportunity to wreck our homes in their own different and distinctive ways. The Republicans want to give us tax cuts, they say. Of course, what they really want to do is do away with progressive tax rates and cut taxes pretty much exclusively for the wealthiest 2% or so of us. They want to cut wasteful spending, and that sounds really good. But the spending they consider wasteful is usually the programs designed to meet the needs of hurting people down at the bottom of the pyramid scheme. But spending money on foreign military efforts to boost profits for big multinational corporations is just a good investment that helps the bankers and the politicians when it's re-election time. The Democrats want to do a lot of good things too. But unfortunately, those things are usually just justifications for them to increase the power of the government, raise taxes, and intrude more and more into our private affairs. All while they dumb us down and try to keep us dependent, so we need a big government to protect and provide for us. And we want to compromise between these two sides? Do we? I don't want the Republicans and Democrats to reach across the aisle and rule over us with an iron handshake. I want the people who hate the Republicans to join with those who hate the Democrats to throw them both out. So there's still a synthesis below, and it seems to me that the fusion of elements is almost universally accompanied by the fission of elements elsewhere. Social incohesion tends to go along with the cohesion of power. A strong political leader arises to restore balance to society. Social cohesion is a threat to power. The power structure predicated on maintaining division below crumbles when the people are united. Remember the Tower of Babel? That, among other things, is what this story is about to me. The powers on high fear social unity down on the earth below. So they confuse our language, they dominate the conversation, they change the meaning of words. They turn political discourse into a game of semantics in which no one can understand anyone else. They're always either talking past each other, or saying the same thing in opposite ways, or suspecting each other of meaning the opposite of what they're saying. And while they engage in fruitless debates filled with empty rhetoric, the tower to the heavens deteriorates and crumbles until not one stone is left stacked on top of another. And yet no crack appears in the prison wall. The demolition of one is the reinforcement of the other. And in religion we find another King Kong and Godzilla locked in battle. Orthodox religion wants submission. It wants to silence questioning. It wants faith. Specifically, faith in authority. Because that's exactly what religion is when you get down to it. You believe what the church tells you. You believe what is written in a certain book or books on the authority of the church. The church tells you that these books, and not others, contain the absolute truth and everything you need to know. Someone might object that they believe in the Bible, not church authority. This is a very Protestant thing to say. But what is the Bible, if not a collection of texts put together by church authorities? It's based on their authority that you accept these books, and only these books, as the Bible. Have you ever even read the books that the church authorities banned from being a part of the Bible? To accept the canon of the church is to accept the authority of the church. So Protestants are ultimately no different from Catholics, or Jews, or Muslims, or anyone else. But this Godzilla of religion is pitted against the King Kong of reductionistic materialistic science. Both say the individual is nothing. You're either a cosmic accident, or the creation of an all-powerful tyrant who can do as he wishes with you, and to whom you must give your absolute submission and obedience. I've always found it ironic that some people claim that our rights come from God, and that without God we have no rights. If the God of religion existed, what rights would we have? We would only have the right to submit to every commandment which was handed down to us by those who are exclusively given the honor of hearing God's voice and dictating His will to the rest of us. But what rights do you have in scientific materialism? You're just cells, just genetic code. Your pain and suffering are only neural patterns in a physical brain which is devoid of a soul. So when the police torture you, there are only changes in a chemical state. Consciousness is just an illusion that results from biological matter. It doesn't exist, and it doesn't matter much what happens to it, since it isn't even anything real that exists in material terms. You exist only to preserve and reproduce the genetic code that gave you form. If a totalitarian state can make that process more efficient, then who are you to object to it by appealing to superstitious beliefs and unscientific things like souls? What kind of synthesis can come between orthodox religion and reductionistic science? I don't want religion and science to find common ground. I want a wall of separation between them. It's great to seek compromises in your personal life. We all want things, we're all pursuing happiness, and we all have a right to do so. We're all trying to avoid suffering, and we have a right to do that too. The fact that there is a conscious subject who is experiencing pleasure and pain is the only thing that makes morality rational. It's the reality of conscious experience that makes it wrong to speak and behave in ways that increase the suffering of others. Without the reality of a spiritual principle within a human being, why would rape be wrong? It's just one organism attempting to procreate via a coercive mating strategy. It's all just genes carrying out their programming. Let natural selection decide if rape is right or wrong. If it confers a reproductive advantage onto the organism committing the rape, then evolution will select their genes, and rape will become the prevailing reproductive strategy. If it doesn't, then other strategies will be adopted instead. But to have any concern for the morality of the strategy, or to have any concern for the conscious being who had to endure the experience of being raped, we have to acknowledge the reality and existence of conscious beings. Reductionistic, scientific materialism will not acknowledge this. Let me give a simple illustration that I think will make my central point perfectly clear. If you're tuning a guitar string, there's a perfect pitch you're striving toward. In relation to this pitch, you may either be flat or sharp. If you're flat, you'll tighten the string. But usually, you'll tighten the string just a little bit too much and end up being sharp. So then you have to loosen the string again, just a little. Usually you'll be flat again, but not as flat as before. So in the process of tuning the string, you go from one extreme to the other until you eventually arrive at the note between flat and sharp that you are aiming toward. But you aren't just seeking a compromise between two extremes. You're aiming toward an ideal. The point isn't to find a pitch halfway between a flat and a sharp note. The point is to be in tune. Let's imagine that you and I both have guitars. My E string is flat, and your E string is sharp. My string is too loose, and yours is too tight, in other words. If you're a Hegelian, you might like to say that my loose guitar string is the thesis, and that your tight guitar string is the antithesis. If I tune my string up, and you tune yours down, until we're in tune with each other, you might say we've reached a synthesis. But this synthesis may or may not be E. We'd have compromised, but our compromise wouldn't have led us to the truth. It may be that my string was very loose, and that your string was only a little bit tight. I was very flat, whereas you were only slightly sharp. So if we meet halfway between these 2 points, we'll be flat. Or maybe we were both flat to begin with. Suppose that I'm very flat. My string is way too loose. You're only slightly flat. Your string is only a little bit too loose. If we meet in the middle, we'll both still be flat. I'll be a little closer to the true note, and you'll be a little further from it, but we'll both fall short of it. So the truth isn't a compromise between two errors. Now imagine that I have a perfectly tuned guitar string, and yours is a little flat. Should I tune down and you tune up? Of course not. You should tune yours to mine. Saying so doesn't make me an uncompromising dogmatist. But what if you don't recognize that there is such a thing as truth? What if you don't acknowledge that there is such a thing as E? Then it will seem to you that I'm being inflexible and refusing to tune my guitar down while asking you to tune yours up. Maybe you respond with stubbornness and say that your pitch is just as valid as mine. But there's a difference between your stubbornness and mine. Your stubbornness is an unwillingness to correct your own error. Your stubbornness is the desire of your ego to make the entire universe tune itself to your off-pitch note. My stubbornness is an unwillingness to abandon the truth. It's humility, not pride. I've tuned my instrument to be in harmony with the music of the universe, and I'm refusing to deviate from that harmony into a state of discord. One of us is stubbornly clinging to error, and the other is stubbornly clinging to truth. So compromise is about opinions. Compromise is sought after by people who are concerned with opinions. People who are concerned with truth only seek truth. If all people seek truth, then they will be in agreement to the degree to which they find it. But this agreement is to be reached by seeking truth, not by seeking compromise. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.